The crystal chandelier above table 7 cast fractured light across the mahogany surface, each shard illuminating the tension that had settled like smoke between the three men seated beneath it. Marcus Whitfield adjusted his Armani cufflinks for the third time in 5 minutes, his manicured fingers betraying the anxiety he refused to acknowledge. Across from him, Chen Wei sat with the practiced stillness of a man who had built empires through patience, his dark eyes reflecting the chandelier's glow as he studied the contract spread before them like battle plans. 37 million, Marcus said, his voice carrying the confidence that had built his real estate empire. That's my final offer for the Shanghai properties. Chen Wei's expression remained unreadable, a skill honed through decades of international negotiations. The third man at the table, Marcus's business partner David Sterling, shifted uncomfortably in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. The Grandview Restaurant hummed with the quiet conversations of the city's elite, the kind of establishment where deals worth more than most people's lifetime earnings were discussed over wine that cost more per bottle than a teacher's monthly salary. The restaurant itself told a story of old money and new ambitions. Built in 1924 by railroad magnate Theodore Grandview, it had survived the Great Depression, 2 world wars, and countless economic upheavals by adapting to serve whoever held power in the city. The walls, paneled in imported Brazilian rosewood, displayed portraits of mayors, governors, and business titans who had shaped the metropolitan landscape. Tonight, it would witness another pivotal moment, though none of the 3 men could have predicted how it would unfold. Elena Vasquez moved between the tables with practiced grace, her worn black shoes silent against the Persian carpets that muffled the sounds of wealth and influence. 26 years old, she carried herself with a dignity that her circumstances couldn't diminish, though her uniform, pressed but showing its age at the seams, told the story of someone working multiple jobs to survive in a city that devoured dreams as quickly as it created them. Her accent, shaped by 18 years in a small village outside Guadalajara before her family's desperate migration north, colored her English with the warm cadences of her homeland. It was an accent that spoke of sun-baked adobe walls, of her grandmother's tortillas made from scratch each morning, of a language that painted emotions in colors English couldn't quite capture. But here, in this temple of American prosperity, her accent was seen as something else entirely, a mark of otherness, a sign of someone who didn't belong among the crystal and mahogany. "Excuse me, senor," Elena said softly, approaching table 7 with a water pitcher. The word senor slipped out unconsciously, a habit from childhood that emerged when she was nervous. Marcus looked up, his expression shifting to one of barely concealed irritation. "English, please," he said, his tone sharp enough to cut glass. "This is America." Elena's cheeks flushed, but she maintained her composure. "Of course, sir. Would you like more water?" "What I'd like," Marcus said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "is service from someone who can speak properly. David, can you understand what she's saying?" David Sterling, a thin man whose wire-rimmed glasses couldn't hide his discomfort with his partner's behavior, cleared his throat. "Marcus, she's just doing her job." "Barely," Marcus replied, his voice dripping with disdain. "Look, honey," he said to Elena, drawing out each word with exaggerated slowness, "we're discussing a very important business deal here. Maybe you could find someone else to serve us, someone who speaks English." Chen Wei observed this exchange with growing interest, though his expression remained neutral. In his 62 years, he had witnessed countless displays of arrogance and prejudice, particularly during his early years building his manufacturing empire, when Western businessmen had dismissed him as just another Chinese upstart. He recognized the familiar pattern of someone using their perceived superiority to diminish another person's worth. Elena's grip on the water pitcher tightened almost imperceptibly. In her years at the Grandview, she had encountered variations of this behavior before, but never so blatantly, never with such calculated cruelty. She thought of her daughter, Sofia, 8 years old and brilliant, who was at home working on homework that challenged students twice her age. She thought of her own master's degree in international relations, earned through night classes and weekend study sessions while working 3 jobs. She thought of the 5 languages she spoke fluently, the result of a mind hungry for connection and understanding. But here, in this temple of American prosperity, her accent was seen as something else entirely, a mark of otherness, a sign of someone who didn't belong among the crystal and mahogany. So she nodded, her dignity intact, despite the humiliation burning in her chest. "I apologize for any inconvenience," she said, her accent carefully controlled but still present. "I can have another server attend to your table." Marcus turned back to his companions with a satisfied smirk. "See, that wasn't so hard. Now where were we?" He gestured dismissively, as if Elena were an insect that had been successfully shooed away.
But Chen Wei was still watching Elena as she moved toward the service station. There was something in her posture, in the way she carried herself despite the treatment she had just endured, that reminded him of his own mother. Li Min had worked in a textile factory in Shanghai for 16 hours a day to support her family, facing daily discrimination from supervisors who saw her rural accent and traditional dress as signs of inferiority. She had taught Chen that dignity was not something others could take away. It was something you chose to maintain, regardless of how others treated you. "The woman has good posture," Chen said quietly in Mandarin, testing the waters. Marcus, oblivious to the language switch, continued shuffling through his papers. "What's that, Chen?" "Nothing important," Chen replied in English, though his eyes remained thoughtful. Elena had reached the service station, where Maria Santos, the head waitress and her closest friend at work, was polishing wine glasses with mechanical precision. Maria, 43 years old, with silver threading through her black hair, had been at the Grandview for 15 years. She had seen servers come and go, had witnessed the casual cruelty that the wealthy sometimes inflicted on those who served them, and had developed a protective instinct for the younger women on staff. "¿Qué pasó, mija?" Maria asked, her voice low and concerned. Elena shook her head, not trusting her voice to remain steady. She had learned long ago that showing vulnerability in this environment was dangerous. It gave people like Marcus Whitfield ammunition to use against you. "Table 7 wants a different server. The man in the gray suit, he doesn't like my accent." Maria's eyes flashed with anger, but she kept her voice controlled. "Ese pendejo," she muttered under her breath. Then louder, "I'll take over their table. You handle the Richardsons on 5. They always ask for you anyway." As Elena moved away from the service station, she caught fragments of conversation from table 7. Marcus was now regaling his companions with an exaggerated imitation of her accent, his voice a cruel caricature that bore no resemblance to the musical cadences of her native Spanish. "Did you hear that? Señor, would you like more water?" Marcus pitched his voice higher, adding a stereotypical accent that would have been offensive in a 1950s movie. "I swear, David, sometimes I wonder if we're still in America or if I've accidentally wandered into a Taco Bell." David Sterling's discomfort was visible now, his face reddening as he glanced around the restaurant. "Marcus, please, people are staring." "Let them stare," Marcus replied, emboldened by what he perceived as his audience's attention. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. If you want to work in a place like this, you should at least make an effort to speak the language properly." Chen Wei set down his wine glass with deliberate precision. "And what language would that be?" he asked, his tone deceptively mild. "English, obviously," Marcus replied, missing the subtle shift in Chen's demeanor. "This is America, after all." "I see," Chen said, nodding slowly. "And you believe that speaking with an accent indicates a lack of intelligence or education?" Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "I'm just saying there's a standard, you know? If you want to succeed in this country, you need to adapt. It's about professionalism." "Professionalism," Chen repeated, the word hanging in the air like a challenge. Elena, now attending to the Richardson family at table 5, tried to focus on their order, but she couldn't entirely block out Marcus's continued commentary. Each mocked phrase, each exaggerated pronunciation felt like a physical blow. She thought of her father, who had worked construction for 12 years in this country and still struggled with English, despite his intelligence and work ethic. She thought of her professor at the community college, Dr. Patricia Williams, who had encouraged Elena to pursue her master's degree despite the challenges of her schedule and circumstances. "Are you all right, dear?" asked Mrs. Richardson, a woman in her 70s whose family had been coming to the Grandview for 3 generations. She had watched Elena serve their table many times and had always been impressed with her knowledge of the menu, her attention to detail, and her genuine warmth. "Yes, ma'am, thank you," Elena replied, forcing a smile. "The salmon special tonight is prepared with the honey glaze and seasonal vegetables." But Mrs. Richardson's eyes were kind and perceptive. "I couldn't help but notice that unpleasant man's behavior. Pay him no mind, sweetheart. Small minds often make the loudest noise." Elena felt tears threaten at the unexpected kindness, but she blinked them back. "Thank you, Mrs. Richardson. That's very kind." Back at table 7, the conversation had returned to business, but the atmosphere remained charged. Chen Wei was studying Marcus with new interest, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. This was not merely about a business deal anymore. It had become something far more revealing about character, about the kind of man he was considering as a partner in ventures that would affect thousands of workers across 2 continents. 37 million, Marcus repeated, apparently believing that restating his offer would somehow make it more compelling. "For properties of that caliber in Shanghai's business district, it's more than generous." "Generous," Chen mused, as if tasting the word. An interesting choice of language. The evening was still young, but already the foundations of what everyone assumed would be a straightforward business transaction were beginning to shift. Elena continued her work, moving between tables with practiced efficiency, unaware that her interaction with Marcus had set in motion a chain of events that would challenge everything each person in that restaurant believed about success, respect, and the true measure of a person's worth. The chandelier above table 7 continued to cast its fractured light, but now those shards seemed less like illumination and more like a warning of the shattering that was yet to come. Elena's shift at the Grandview typically began at 4 p.m. and ended at midnight, but her day started much earlier. The alarm clock on her nightstand, a thrift store find with numbers barely visible through scratched glass, buzzed at 5:30 a.m. with the persistence of a mechanical rooster. She had learned to wake before it sounded, her internal clock trained by years of necessity to rise before the world demanded her attention. Her apartment in the Riverside district told the story of a life carefully managed on the margins. 2 bedrooms, though she used the larger one as a combination bedroom and study area, with Sofia's twin bed tucked into one corner and Elena's desk occupying another. The walls, painted in the landlord's preferred beige, were covered with Sofia's artwork, Elena's certificates from her master's program, and a large map of the world where colorful pins marked places Elena dreamed of visiting someday. The morning routine was choreographed through repetition. Coffee first, not the expensive beans served at establishments like the Grandview, but a store brand that she bought in bulk and rationed carefully. While it brewed, she would review her schedule. morning classes at the community center where she taught English as a second language 3 days a week, afternoon study sessions for her ongoing certification in international business, and then the evening shift at the restaurant. "Mummy, can you help me with my math homework?" Sofia's voice, still thick with sleep, drifted from her bed. Elena turned from her coffee to look at her daughter, 8 years old and already showing signs of the intelligence that would either lift her out of their circumstances or frustrate her with the limitations of their current reality. Sofia had inherited Elena's dark eyes and quick mind, but also something Elena hoped she would never lose, an unshakable optimism about the world's possibilities. "Of course, mija, but first, breakfast." The kitchen was a masterclass in efficiency born from necessity. Elena could prepare a nutritious breakfast using ingredients that cost less than what Marcus Whitfield probably spent on his morning coffee. Scrambled eggs with peppers from her windowsill herb garden, toast from day-old bread she bought at a discount, and orange juice diluted just enough to make it last 3 days instead of 2. "Mrs. Chen at school says I'm reading at a 6th grade level," Sofia announced between bites of eggs, her legs swinging from the chair that was still slightly too tall for her. "She wants to put me in the accelerated program." Elena's heart swelled with pride and worry in equal measure. The accelerated program would mean more opportunities for Sofia, but also more expenses. Special supplies, field trips, activities that other families could afford without thinking twice. "That's wonderful, baby. We'll make it work." As Sofia gathered her backpack and lunch, Elena caught a glimpse of herself in the hallway mirror. At 26, she carried herself with purpose, but the mirror reflected the toll of her schedule. Dark circles under her eyes that concealer couldn't quite hide, hair that she kept neat but couldn't afford to style professionally, clothes that were clean and pressed but showed their age in ways only another working mother would notice. The bus ride to the community center gave Elena 23 minutes to transform herself from exhausted mother into confident educator. She used the time to review her lesson plans and center herself for the day ahead. Teaching English to other immigrants was more than just a job. It was a daily reminder of her own journey and a window into the struggles of others walking the same difficult path. The Riverside Community Center occupied a building that had once been an elementary school. The classrooms still smelled faintly of chalk and childhood dreams, though they now served a different population with different kinds of dreams. Elena's students ranged in age from 17 to 67, united by their shared determination to master a language that often seemed designed to confuse rather than communicate. Her students that Tuesday morning included Ahmad, a Syrian engineer whose credentials weren't recognized in America despite his 15 years of experience; Fatima, a Somali mother of 4 who cleaned office buildings at night and studied English during the day; and Igor, a Russian physicist who had won awards in his homeland but now worked in a factory while fighting to pass the English proficiency tests that would let him teach again. "Today we practiced job interviews," Elena announced, and she noticed the familiar mix of excitement and anxiety that crossed her students' faces. They all understood that language was the gateway to opportunity in America, but they also knew that accent and pronunciation could close doors as quickly as competence could open them. "Elena," Ahmad raised his hand, his English careful and precise. "Yesterday I have interview at engineering firm. The manager, he asked me to repeat everything 3 times. Then he say, maybe I try job at construction instead." The class fell silent. They had all experienced variations of this scene, the dismissive looks, the suggestions that perhaps they should consider more suitable employment, the way their intelligence was questioned the moment their accent was heard. "What did you say to him?" Elena asked, though she could guess from Ahmad's expression. "Nothing," Ahmad replied, his shoulder sagging slightly. "What can I say? I need job." Elena felt the familiar fire that burned in her chest whenever she encountered this particular injustice. She thought of Marcus Whitfield's cruel imitation of her accent, of the assumption that how someone spoke was a measure of what they could contribute. "You are a brilliant engineer," she said firmly, addressing Ahmad but speaking to the whole class. Your accent does not change that fact. Your knowledge does not diminish because your pronunciation is different. We practice not because we are broken, but because we are adding tools to our toolkit. The lesson continued with mock interviews, with Elena playing various roles: the encouraging interviewer, the dismissive manager, the neutral professional. Each scenario was designed to prepare her students for the realities they would face while also building their confidence to persist despite rejection. During her lunch break, Elena walked to the nearby park where she often ate her sandwich while studying for her international business certification. The program, offered through the State University's Extension campus, was her pathway to a different future, one where she might use her mind rather than just her hands, where her multilingual abilities would be seen as assets rather than curiosities. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her sister Carmen, who lived 3 states away and worked as a nurse. Saw Sofia's pictures from the science fair. That girl is going to be a doctor or an engineer. You're doing something right, hermana. Elena smiled despite her exhaustion. Carmen's support meant everything, especially on days when the gap between dreams and reality felt impossibly wide. Carmen had been the first in their family to complete college, paving the way and proving that their parents' sacrifice in coming to America could yield results that justified the cost. The afternoon study session took place in the University Extension Building's library, a space that smelled of ambition and possibility. Elena spread her textbooks across a corner table, her notebook filled with meticulous notes in her precise handwriting. International trade law, cultural communication strategies, economic development theory, subjects that fascinated her and fed her dreams of someday working in a career that utilized her languages and cultural knowledge. "Excuse me? Are you Elena Vasquez?" Elena looked up to find Dr. Patricia Williams, her favorite professor, standing beside her table. Dr. Williams, an African-American woman in her 50s, had been the first person at the university to really see Elena's potential, to encourage her to think beyond survival and toward true success. "Dr. Williams, hello. I was just reviewing the trade agreement analysis. I wanted to speak with you about the summer internship program," Dr. Williams said, settling into the chair across from Elena. "There's a position with the International Trade Council that I think would be perfect for you. The pay isn't much, but the experience would be invaluable for your career goals." Elena's heart leapt at the possibility, but reality quickly reasserted itself. "The internship, would it interfere with evening work?" Dr. Williams studied Elena's face, recognizing the conflict playing out behind her eyes. She had seen this struggle in many of her adult students, the tension between immediate necessity and long-term opportunity. "The internship runs from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. I know that might create challenges with your current schedule."
"Can I think about it?" Elena asked, though she already knew what her answer would have to be. "Of course. But Elena," Dr. Williams leaned forward, her expression earnest, "don't let fear of temporary hardship prevent you from seizing an opportunity that could change your life permanently." The conversation haunted Elena as she prepared for her evening shift at the Grandview. She thought about paths not taken, about the graduate school acceptance letter she had reluctantly declined 3 years ago because she couldn't afford to stop working. She thought about Ahmad's deflated expression in class, about her own dreams deferred by the daily necessities of survival. By 3:45 p.m., she was back in her uniform, checking her reflection in the restaurant's employee bathroom. The transformation was complete. From teacher and student back to server. From someone valued for her mind to someone judged by her accent in just one of them. She tied her hair back, checked that her name tag was straight, and prepared herself for another evening of navigating the complex social dynamics of serving the city's elite. The early dinner crowd at the Grandview was typically composed of business people holding meetings over expensive meals. elderly couples celebrating anniversaries, and occasionally families celebrating special occasions. Elena had learned to read the room quickly, to adjust her approach based on the subtle cues that indicated whether customers would be respectful, demanding, or dismissive. She was refilling water glasses at table 3 when she overheard a conversation at table 12 that made her pause. Two women, both well-dressed and clearly wealthy, were discussing their children's college applications. "Sarah's been rejected from 3 schools already," one woman said, her voice tight with frustration. "Her SAT scores are decent, but her language requirement is holding her back. She can barely pass Spanish, and these schools want students who are truly multilingual." "It's so competitive now," the other woman replied. "Emma's admissions counselor said being fluent in multiple languages is almost a requirement for the top universities. Apparently, it demonstrates global awareness and cultural competency." Elena continued her work, but the irony wasn't lost on her. Here were women whose children struggled to learn a second language, while Elena herself was fluent in 5: Spanish, English, Mandarin, Portuguese, and Italian, yet was treated as intellectually inferior because of her accent in just one of them. As the evening progressed, Elena served families who casually spent more on dinner than she earned in a week, listened to conversations about vacation homes and investment properties while calculating whether she could afford to buy Sofia new shoes this month. Each interaction was a reminder of the vast gulf between the world she served and the world she inhabited. But it was also a reminder of her motivation. Every dismissive comment, every assumption about her intelligence based on her accent, every casual display of wealth and privilege only strengthened her determination to create a different reality for Sofia. Her daughter would grow up bilingual by choice, not necessity. She would attend universities where her multilingual abilities would be celebrated as achievements, not stigmatized as deficiencies. At 11:30 p.m., as Elena cleaned her final table of the evening, she allowed herself a moment to imagine a different future. In that future, she worked in an office where her cultural knowledge was valued, where her accent was seen as an asset in international negotiations, where her intelligence was measured by her contributions rather than her pronunciation. Tomorrow would bring another 5:30 a.m. alarm, another day of juggling roles and responsibilities, another series of small humiliations and quiet victories. But tonight, as she hung up her uniform and checked on sleeping Sofia, Elena held on to the dream that sustained her through every difficult day. The dream that her sacrifices would create opportunities her daughter would never have to struggle for. The following weeks at the Grandview settled into a pattern that Elena recognized all too well. Marcus Whitfield had become a regular, appearing twice a week for business dinners, each visit accompanied by his particular brand of casual cruelty. He seemed to take perverse pleasure in requesting Elena as his server, as if her presence provided him with entertainment that complemented his expensive meals. "Oh, look, it's our little ESL student," Marcus announced as Elena approached table 7 on a Thursday evening in late October. He was dining with a different group tonight. 3 men in their 50s, all wearing the uniform of successful executives, tailored suits, expensive watches, and the confidence that came from never having to worry about money. Elena maintained her professional composure, though her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Good evening, gentlemen. Would you like to start with drinks?" "I'll have a Macallan 25, neat." Then he turned to his companions with a theatrical whisper that was clearly intended to be overheard. "You have to speak slowly and clearly with this one. English isn't her first language." One of his companions, a man with silver hair and kind eyes, who introduced himself as Robert Chen, no relation to Chen Wei, Elena noted, looked uncomfortable with Marcus's behavior. "That's unnecessary, Marcus." "It's just reality, Bob. I'm actually helping her improve her English skills. It's like on-the-job training."
Elena took their drink orders with practiced efficiency, her mind automatically calculating the cost of Marcus's whiskey. $180 for a single glass, more than she earned in an entire shift. As she walked toward the bar, she caught fragments of their conversation about a real estate development project that would displace dozens of immigrant families from affordable housing. At the bar, she encountered James Morrison, the restaurant's sommelier and one of the few staff members who had consistently treated her with respect since her first day. James, a man in his 30s with an encyclopedic knowledge of wine and a genuine interest in his colleagues' lives, had noticed Marcus's pattern of behavior. "That's the third time this month he's requested you as his server," James observed as he prepared the drinks. "And every time he acts like he's auditioning for a role as the villain in a bad movie." "Some people need to feel superior to others to feel good about themselves," Elena replied, her voice carefully neutral. She had learned that complaining about customers, even obviously problematic ones, could be dangerous for someone in her position. "It's more than that," James said, lowering his voice. "I've been watching him. He's not just rude, he's deliberately cruel. There's a difference." As Elena returned to table 7 with the drinks, she overheard Marcus regaling his companions with an exaggerated story about a previous encounter with her. So she comes up to the table and she says, and I swear I'm not making this up, she says, "Good evening, senores, welcome to the Grandview Restaurant." I mean, she sounded like Speedy Gonzales trying to be sophisticated. Elena had never mispronounced "the" as "z" in her life, but Marcus's story earned chuckles from 2 of his 3 companions. Robert Chen, however, was studying Elena with growing interest, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "Actually," Robert said as Elena placed his wineglass before him, "your English is quite good. Have you been in the United States long?" The question, asked with genuine curiosity rather than condescension, caught Elena off guard. 8 years, sir, since I was 18. "And what did you study before you came here?" Robert continued, ignoring Marcus's obvious irritation at the direction of the conversation. Elena hesitated. In her experience, revealing her educational background to customers like Marcus only provided him with more ammunition for mockery. But something in Robert's demeanor encouraged honesty. "I completed my bachelor's degree in international relations at the University of Guadalajara before coming here. I'm currently pursuing additional certifications in international business." The silence that followed was profound. Marcus's expression shifted from amusement to something approaching shock, while his 2 other companions suddenly looked at Elena with new interest. "International relations," Robert repeated thoughtfully. "That's fascinating. What drew you to that field?" "I've always been interested in how different cultures communicate and collaborate. Language is just one tool for building bridges between people." Marcus had recovered from his surprise and was now visibly annoyed by the attention Elena was receiving. "That's all very interesting, but we're here to eat, not to discuss our server's academic aspirations. Could we see the menu now?" The dismissal was sharp and final, designed to put Elena back in her place and end a conversation that was making Marcus uncomfortable. Elena nodded and distributed the menus, but she noticed that Robert Chen continued to watch her thoughtfully as she explained the evening specials. Over the following weeks, similar scenes played out with depressing regularity. Marcus would arrive with business associates, request Elena as his server, and then proceed to treat her as both servant and entertainment. His behavior seemed to escalate with each visit, as if he were testing the boundaries of what he could say and do without consequences. On a busy Friday evening in November, Marcus arrived with a particularly important group, potential investors in his latest development project. The stakes were higher, his need to project dominance was stronger, and his treatment of Elena reached new depths of cruelty. "Gentlemen," he announced as Elena approached their table, "welcome our resident United Nations representative. She speaks every language except proper English." The comment drew uncomfortable laughter from some of his guests, but Elena noticed that others seemed disturbed by Marcus's behavior. One woman, introduced as Sandra Mitchell, a prominent architect, actually grimaced at the comment.
"Could I have the wine list, please?" Sandra asked Elena directly, her tone pointedly respectful. "Of course," Elena replied, retrieving the leather-bound wine menu from the neighboring table. "Would you like me to explain any of the selections?" "Actually, yes," Sandra said, her eyes flashing with something that might have been defiance. "I'm looking for something from South America. Do you have any recommendations?" Elena's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. This was territory where her knowledge and experience gave her confidence. "We have an excellent Malbec from Mendoza, Argentina. The 2018 vintage has beautiful notes of dark fruit and chocolate. There's also a wonderful Carmenere from Chile's Colchagua Valley that pairs beautifully with red meat." She provided detailed descriptions of several wines, her accent barely noticeable as she spoke with authority about subjects she was passionate about. Sandra listened intently and asked follow-up questions and ultimately ordered one of Elena's recommendations. Marcus watched this exchange with growing irritation, clearly annoyed that his evening's entertainment had been hijacked by an actual conversation about wine. When Elena left to retrieve the bottle, Marcus launched into damage control. "Don't let her fool you," he said to Sandra. "She's probably just memorizing descriptions from the wine list. These people are good at repeating information without really understanding it." "These people? What exactly do you mean by that, Marcus?" The table fell silent. Marcus had overplayed his hand, revealing the ugly prejudices that drove his behavior in language that couldn't be dismissed as harmless teasing. "I just meant, service industry workers." Marcus backtracked, but the damage was done. Several of his potential investors were now looking at him with barely concealed disgust. When Elena returned with the wine, Sandra made a point of engaging her in conversation about Argentina's wine regions, revealing that Elena had spent a summer during college working at a vineyard in Mendoza and had extensive knowledge of South American viticulture. "You actually worked in the wine industry?" Sandra asked, her voice filled with genuine interest. "Just for a summer," Elena replied modestly, "but I learned so much about the process. The Mendoza region is incredible. The altitude and climate create perfect conditions for Malbec grapes." As Elena poured the wine for Sandra to taste, Marcus made one final desperate attempt to reassert control over the situation. "Well, isn't this fascinating?" he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Maybe next she'll tell us about her PhD in astrophysics." The comment hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Sandra's face reddened with anger, and she set down her wine glass with enough force to make the stem ring against the table. "You know what, Marcus?" Sandra said, her voice carrying across the nearby tables. "I've heard enough. Your behavior tonight has been absolutely appalling. This young woman is clearly intelligent, knowledgeable, and professional, and you've spent the entire evening trying to humiliate her for your own entertainment." Other diners were beginning to stare. Marcus's face reddened as he realized that his private sport had become a public spectacle and not in his favor. "Sandra, please, I was just—" "You were just what? Making racist comments? Mocking someone's accent? Using your perceived position of power to belittle another human being?" Sandra's voice rose with each question. "I don't know what kind of business you think you're running, but I want no part of it." She stood up, gathered her purse, and looked directly at Elena. "Thank you for the excellent wine recommendation. Your knowledge and professionalism are impressive, and you deserve much better than this." Sandra's departure created a ripple effect. Two other potential investors made polite excuses and left within minutes, clearly uncomfortable with the scene they had witnessed and unwilling to associate themselves with Marcus's behavior. Elena continued to serve the remaining guests with quiet dignity, but she could feel the shift in the restaurant's atmosphere. Other servers had noticed the confrontation, other diners had witnessed Marcus's humiliation, and word was already spreading through the staff about what had transpired at Table 7. In the kitchen, Maria Santos was filling other servers in on the details she had observed from across the dining room. "I've been waiting for someone to put that pendejo in his place," Maria said, her voice filled with satisfaction. "Elena has been taking his abuse for weeks without saying a word."
"Why doesn't she just refuse to serve him?" asked Jennifer, one of the younger servers who had only been at the Grandview for a few months. "Because she can't afford to lose this job," Maria replied, her voice heavy with the weight of understanding. "When you have bills to pay and a child to feed, you swallow a lot of pride." The conversation in the kitchen was interrupted by the appearance of Mr. Harrison, the restaurant's general manager. Thomas Harrison was a man in his late 50s who had built his career on maintaining the Grandview's reputation for excellence and discretion. He prided himself on running an establishment where the city's elite could dine without incident, and Marcus's behavior was threatening that carefully maintained atmosphere. "Maria, could I speak with Elena when she has a moment?" Harrison asked, his tone unreadable. Elena's heart sank when she received the message. In her experience, being called to speak with management was rarely good news, especially after a public confrontation involving customers. She finished serving her current tables and made her way to Harrison's office, her mind racing through possible explanations and defenses. Harrison's office was small but elegant, decorated with photos of the restaurant's history and certificates of excellence from various hospitality organizations. Harrison gestured for Elena to take a seat, then closed the door behind them. "Elena, I want to hear your version of what happened tonight," Harrison said, settling behind his desk. Elena chose her words carefully, explaining the evening's events without editorial commentary, focusing on facts rather than feelings. She described Marcus's comments, Sandra's reactions, and the subsequent departure of several guests. When she finished, Harrison was quiet for a long moment. "This isn't the first complaint I've received about Mr. Whitfield's behavior," he finally said. "Several staff members have mentioned incidents, and tonight, 2 other customers called to express their displeasure with what they witnessed." Elena waited, unsure whether this was leading toward her termination or something else entirely. "However," Harrison continued, "every report I've received has also mentioned your professionalism under extremely difficult circumstances. Mrs. Mitchell called personally to commend your knowledge and service, and she's not someone who gives praise lightly." Relief flooded through Elena, but she remained cautious. "I want you to know that the Grandview does not tolerate harassment of our staff," Harrison said firmly. "Mr. Whitfield will be spoken to, and if his behavior continues, he will no longer be welcome here, regardless of how much he spends." It was more support than Elena had expected, and she felt tears threaten at the unexpected validation. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I appreciate that very much." "You're a valuable member of our team, Elena. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." As Elena left Harrison's office, she felt a shift in her own perception of her worth and place in the world. For weeks, she had absorbed Marcus's abuse as if it were somehow deserved, as if her accent and immigrant status made her a legitimate target for his cruelty. But Sandra's defense and Harrison's support reminded her that Marcus's behavior said nothing about her and everything about him. The next week brought an unexpected development. Chen Wei returned to the Grandview, this time without Marcus and David Sterling. He specifically requested a table in Elena's section, and when she approached to take his order, he greeted her with a slight nod of recognition. "Good evening," she said, offering him the wine list. "Will you be dining alone this evening?" "Yes, thank you," Chen replied in English, then added something in Mandarin that made Elena's eyes widen in surprise. Without thinking, Elena responded in fluent Mandarin, her accent perfect and her grammar impeccable. "Thank you for your kind words, Mr. Chen. I hope you'll enjoy your dinner tonight." Chen's eyebrows rose appreciatively. "Your Mandarin is excellent. Where did you learn to speak it so well?" Elena switched back to English, aware that their conversation was drawing curious glances from nearby tables. "I studied it in college and continued practicing with conversation groups. I've always been fascinated by languages in different cultures." 5 languages, if I'm not mistaken. Spanish, English, Mandarin, Portuguese, and Italian? Elena's surprise was evident. How did you—
I make it my business to learn about interesting people, Chen replied with a slight smile. And your story is quite interesting indeed. What Elena didn't know was that Chen Wei had spent the week since his first visit to the Grandview conducting his own investigation into Marcus Whitfield's character and business practices. The cruel treatment of a restaurant server might seem like a small thing, but Chen had learned that how people treated those they perceived as powerless revealed their true nature. His research had uncovered a pattern of behavior that extended far beyond restaurant rudeness. Marcus's construction projects consistently underpaid immigrant workers. His rental properties were frequently cited for unsafe conditions that primarily affected non-English-speaking tenants, and his business practices showed a callous disregard for anyone he viewed as beneath his social station. "Mr. Chen," Elena said carefully, "may I ask why you're interested in my story?" Chen considered his response carefully. "Let me ask you something, Miss Vasquez. If you could work in any field, utilizing all of your skills and education, what would you choose to do?" The question caught Elena off guard. It had been so long since anyone had asked her about her dreams rather than her immediate needs that she had to pause and remember what those dreams were. "International business development," she said finally. "Helping companies navigate cultural differences when expanding into new markets, using language and cultural knowledge to build bridges between different business communities." Chen nodded approvingly. "And what's preventing you from pursuing that career path?" Elena almost laughed at the simplicity of the question and the complexity of the answer. "Time, money, opportunity, experience, connections. The usual barriers that exist when you're working multiple jobs just to survive." "I see," Chen said, his expression thoughtful. "Would you be interested in discussing those barriers over coffee sometime? I may know of some opportunities that would utilize your unique skill set." Elena's heart raced with possibility and suspicion in equal measure. In her experience, offers that seemed too good to be true usually were, but something in Chen's manner suggested sincerity rather than manipulation. "That's very kind, but I should ask, what's your interest in helping me?" Chen's smile was enigmatic. "Let's just say that I believe talent should be recognized and developed, regardless of where it's currently employed. And I have a particular interest in ensuring that people like Marcus Whitfield don't continue to profit from their prejudices." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Chen's business partner, David Sterling, who appeared unexpectedly at their table. David looked surprised to see Elena engaged in what appeared to be a serious conversation with Chen, rather than simply taking his order. "Chen, I didn't expect to find you here," David said, his confusion evident. "David," Chen replied smoothly, "I'd like you to meet Elena Vasquez. We were just discussing international business development opportunities." David's expression shifted from confusion to something approaching alarm. He had clearly recognized Elena from her previous encounters with Marcus Whitfield, and the implications of Chen's statement were beginning to dawn on him. "Perhaps we could talk privately," David suggested to Chen, his voice tight with barely concealed anxiety. "Of course," Chen replied, then turned back to Elena. "Ms. Vasquez, I hope you'll consider my offer to continue this conversation. Here is my business card." He handed her an elegant business card with text in both English and Mandarin. "Please call my office next week." As Elena walked away from the table, she could hear David's urgent whispered questions and Chen's calm responses. She didn't need to understand every word to recognize that David was concerned about Chen's interest in her and that Chen's responses were doing little to alleviate that concern. The business card in her pocket felt like 1,000 pounds, a tangible connection to possibilities she had barely allowed herself to imagine. But it also represented a risk.
Getting involved with Marcus Whitfield's business associates, even one as seemingly decent as Chen Wei, could complicate her life in ways she wasn't prepared for. The evening continued with Elena serving her other tables, but her mind kept returning to Chen's offer and David's obvious discomfort. She was beginning to understand that her interactions with Marcus had created ripples that extended far beyond the dining room of the Grandview, and those ripples were about to become waves that would change everything. As her shift ended and she prepared to leave for the night, Elena made a decision that would alter the trajectory of her life. She would call Chen Wei's office on Monday morning, not because she trusted him completely, but because she had finally realized that taking calculated risks was the only way to break free from the cycle of survival that had defined her life for too long. The city outside the Grandview sparkled with lights that reflected off glass towers built by men like Marcus Whitfield. But tonight Elena saw those lights differently. They no longer seemed like distant stars in an unreachable sky. They looked like destinations that might finally be within her grasp.
Monday morning arrived with the crisp clarity of November air, and Elena's hand shaking as she dialed the number on Chen Wei's business card. The phone rang 3 times before a professional voice answered in both English and Mandarin. Chen International Holdings, this is Rebecca speaking. How may I help you? Hello, Elena said, her voice steadier than her nerves. My name is Elena Vasquez. Mr. Chen asked me to call about a potential business opportunity. There was a brief pause, then the warmth in Rebecca's voice increased noticeably. Oh yes, Miss Vasquez. Mr. Chen has been expecting your call. He's asked me to schedule a meeting for this afternoon if you're available. Would 3 p.m. work for you? Elena quickly calculated her schedule. She could rearrange her study session and arrive at the Grandview a bit later than usual. Yes, 3 p.m. would be perfect. Wonderful. The address is 1247 Financial Plaza, 42nd story. When you arrive, just let security know you're meeting with Mr. Chen and they'll direct you. The Financial Plaza was a monument to modern success, its glass and steel facade reflecting the ambitions of everyone who entered its marble-clad lobby. Elena had walked past it countless times, but never imagined she would have reason to step inside. The security checkpoint was staffed by uniformed guards who looked at her with mild curiosity as she explained her appointment. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt like ascending to another world. Through the glass walls, she watched the city shrink below her until the streets she knew intimately looked like patterns on a map. When the doors opened, she stepped into a reception area that whispered of wealth and international influence. Art from multiple continents, fresh flowers that probably cost more than her weekly groceries, and a view of the city that made her breath catch. Miss Vasquez? A young woman approached with a welcoming smile. I'm Rebecca. Mr. Chen is ready to see you. Chen Wei's office was a study in understated power. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the metropolitan area, while the furnishings spoke of taste rather than ostentation. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes in multiple languages, and Elena noticed several awards and certificates that suggested Chen's empire was even more extensive than she had realized. Elena, Chen rose from behind his desk, gesturing toward a comfortable seating area with 2 armchairs arranged around a low table. Thank you for coming. Please, make yourself comfortable. As they settled into the chairs, Rebecca appeared with tea service. Not the perfunctory office coffee Elena had expected, but an elegant pot of jasmine tea with delicate porcelain cups. I hope you don't mind, Chen said, pouring the tea with practiced ease. But I took the liberty of doing some research on your background. Elena's stomach tightened. In her experience, when wealthy people investigated her background, it was usually to find reasons to exclude her from opportunities. I discovered some remarkable things, Chen continued, his tone conversational, but his eyes serious. Your master's thesis on cross-cultural communication and international trade was published in the Journal of Global Business Studies. Your professors at the University Extension Program speak of you in glowing terms, and your work teaching English to other immigrants has earned recognition from the Community Center's Board of Directors.
Elena blinked in surprise. She hadn't realized that anyone outside her immediate academic circle had noticed her scholarly work, much less considered it remarkable. More importantly, Chen continued, his eyes more serious, I learned that you completed your degree while working multiple jobs and raising a daughter as a single mother. That level of determination and time management suggests character traits that are invaluable in business. Mr. Chen, said Elena carefully, I appreciate your kind words, but I have to ask, why are you interested in helping me? We barely know each other. Chen set down his teacup and leaned back in his chair, his expression growing more serious. Because, Elena, I believe that talent and character should be rewarded, regardless of where they're discovered, and because I have a business problem that your unique skills might help me solve. He rose and walked to his desk, returning with a folder that he placed on the table between them.
My company is expanding our operations into Latin America, specifically Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina. We're looking to establish manufacturing partnerships and develop supply chains that will serve both our Chinese operations and our growing North American market. Elena's pulse quickened as she realized where this conversation was headed. The challenge, Chen continued, is that success in these markets requires more than just capital investment. It requires cultural understanding, language skills, and the ability to build trust with local business communities. It requires someone who can serve as a bridge between different worlds. He opened the folder, revealing documents in multiple languages and detailed business plans that represented months of preparation. What I'm offering you, Elena, is not charity. It's an opportunity to join my company as Director of Latin American Business Development. The position would involve travel, cultural consultation, and eventually managing a team of professionals who would work under your direction. Elena stared at the documents, her mind racing to process what she was hearing. Mr. Chen, I'm honored, but I have to be honest. I don't have experience at that level of business operations. No, Chen agreed. You don't have that specific experience, but you have something more valuable. The combination of analytical intelligence, cultural knowledge, and personal resilience that can't be taught in business school. He pulled out another document, a job description with a salary that made Elena's eyes widen in disbelief. The starting salary is $85,000 annually, with performance bonuses and full benefits, including health insurance, retirement contributions, and professional development funding. There's also a $10,000 signing bonus to help you with your transition. Elena felt the room spinning slightly. The figure represented more money than she had earned in the past 2 years combined, enough to change not just her life, but Sofia's future in ways she had only dreamed about. This seems too good to be true, she said honestly. There must be a catch. Chen's expression grew more serious. There is a condition, though perhaps not the kind you're expecting. Taking this position would mean you could no longer work at the Grandview Restaurant. Elena almost laughed. That's hardly a sacrifice. Ah, but it is, Chen said, his eyes twinkling with something that might have been amusement. Because Marcus Whitfield would no longer have the opportunity to demonstrate his character so publicly. The implications of Chen's statement began to dawn on Elena. You're using me to get back at Marcus somehow. Not get back at him, Chen corrected, simply to demonstrate the consequences of his behavior. You see, Elena, Marcus has been seeking a partnership with my company for his real estate developments. He believes that having a Chinese business partner would give him access to international capital and prestige. Chen stood and walked to his window, looking out over the city below. What Marcus doesn't understand is that my business philosophy is based on respect for employees, for partners, for communities. A man who treats a restaurant server with cruelty and contempt will inevitably treat his business partners, his employees, and his customers the same way. Elena began to understand the elegant justice of Chen's plan. So by hiring me, you're demonstrating that what Marcus saw as a weakness, my background, my accent, you see as a strength. Exactly. And Marcus will have to watch as the woman he mocked for her accent becomes my director of Latin American operations, while his partnership proposal is permanently declined. The vindication felt sweet, but Elena forced herself to think practically. What if this is all about revenge and the job doesn't actually exist? What if you're using me to make a point and then I'm left unemployed? Chen returned to his chair and looked directly into her eyes. Elena, I'm going to tell you something that very few people know. 25 years ago, I was working in a factory in Hong Kong. My English was poor, my accent was thick, and my Western colleagues treated me with the same contempt that Marcus shows you. His voice grew softer, more personal. One day, an American businessman saw past my accent and recognized my potential. He gave me an opportunity that changed my life, and I've spent the past 2 decades paying that kindness forward. He opened another folder, this one containing letters of recommendation from business leaders, academic references, and testimonials that painted a picture of Chen as someone who kept his promises and invested in people's potential.
I'm not offering you this position to use you as a weapon against Marcus, Chen said firmly. I'm offering it because you're exceptionally qualified and because my company needs someone with your skills. The fact that it will also demonstrate to Marcus the consequences of his prejudice is simply a satisfying bonus. Elena studied the job description again, noting the detailed responsibilities, the clear career progression path, and the professional development opportunities that could transform her from a struggling single mother into a successful business executive. "When would you need an answer?" she asked. "Take whatever time you need," Chen replied, "but I should mention that Marcus has requested another meeting with me this Friday. He's planning to bring his full partnership proposal, complete with projected profits and expansion plans." Elena understood the timeline. If she accepted Chen's offer, she could give her notice at the Grandview before Marcus's crucial meeting, ensuring that he would witness her transformation from servant to executive in the most dramatic way possible. "Mr. Chen," she said slowly, "if I accept this position, I want to be clear about something. I don't want to be hired because of my story, or because you want to teach Marcus a lesson. I want to be hired because I can do the job and add value to your company." Chen's smile was genuine and approving. "Elena, that attitude is exactly why you're perfect for this position. And I can promise you that by the time Marcus sees you in your new role, your success will be based entirely on your own merit." They spent the next hour discussing the specific requirements of the position, the company's expansion plans, and Elena's ideas for building business relationships in Latin American markets. With each question Chen asked and each answer Elena provided, it became clear that the job offer was legitimate and that her qualifications were genuine. As the meeting concluded, Chen handed her a formal offer letter. "Think it over, discuss it with your family, and let me know your decision by Thursday." Elena left the financial plaza in a daze, the offer letter folded carefully in her purse next to her community college textbooks. The contrast between her 2 worlds had never been more stark. In one, she was Elena the waitress, subjected to mockery and disrespect. In the other, she was Elena the international business professional, valued for her knowledge and potential. That evening, as she helped Sofia with homework at their small kitchen table, Elena couldn't help but imagine how different their lives could be. Private school for Sofia, a house in a better neighborhood, the financial security to pursue dreams rather than just survive. "Mommy, you look different tonight," Sofia observed, looking up from her math workbook. "You look happy." Elena smiled, pulling her daughter closer. "I might have some good news soon, mija. But let's finish your homework first." As Sofia returned to her math problems, Elena allowed herself to imagine the look on Marcus Whitfield's face when he discovered that the woman he had mocked and dismissed was now earning more in a month than he probably tipped in a year. The thought filled her with a satisfaction that was both sweet and empowering. But more importantly, she imagined Sofia's face when she realized that her mother's sacrifices had finally paid off, that the American dream they had been chasing for 8 years was finally within their grasp. Thursday morning arrived with Elena's decision already made. She had spent 2 sleepless nights weighing the offer, discussing it with Carmen over long phone conversations, and ultimately realizing that fear of change was a luxury she could no longer afford. Sofia deserved better, and Elena finally had the chance to provide it. The call to Chen Wei's office was brief and professional. "Mr. Chen, this is Elena Vasquez. I'm calling to accept your offer." "Excellent," Chen replied, his satisfaction evident even over the phone. "Rebecca will email you the formal paperwork and orientation details. Your start date will be Monday, December 2nd. That should give you time to transition from your current positions." "Thank you, Mr. Chen. I won't let you down." "I know you won't, Elena. I look forward to working with you." Elena's next call was more difficult. Mr. Harrison at the Grandview was surprised by her 2 weeks' notice, but gracious in his response. "Elena, I have to say this is unexpected, but I'm happy for you. You've been one of our most professional and knowledgeable servers. What will you be doing?" "I've accepted a position in international business development," Elena replied, still marveling at the truth of those words.
"That's wonderful. Your new employer is very fortunate." The next 2 weeks at the Grandview passed in a blur of training her replacement, saying goodbye to colleagues, and trying to contain her excitement about the future. Maria was thrilled for her, but also worried about losing her closest friend at work. "Promise me you won't forget us little people when you're running boardrooms and flying to business meetings," Maria joked, though her eyes were misty with genuine pride. "Never," Elena replied, hugging her friend tightly. "And this job means I can finally afford to take you and Sofia out for dinner at a nice restaurant, as customers, not servers." Marcus Whitfield continued his regular visits to the Grandview during Elena's final 2 weeks, seemingly unaware that anything had changed. He maintained his pattern of requesting her as his server and subjecting her to his usual repertoire of condescending comments. Elena endured it with new patience, knowing that each insult would soon become a monument to his own ignorance. On her final Friday at the Grandview, the same day as Marcus's crucial meeting with Chen Wei, Elena worked her last shift with a mixture of nostalgia and anticipation. The restaurant had been a battleground, but it had also been a place where she had learned resilience, where she had met people like Maria who became family, and where she had discovered strengths she didn't know she possessed. As fate would have it, Marcus arrived early for his meeting with Chen Wei, requesting a table in Elena's section for what he assumed would be a celebratory pre-meeting drink. He was accompanied by David Sterling and 2 other members of his development team, all of them radiating the confidence of men who believed success was inevitable. "Well, well," Marcus said as Elena approached their table for the final time, "if it isn't our resident linguistics expert, I hope you're prepared to give us your best service tonight. This is a very important evening for us." "Of course, sir," Elena replied, her professionalism masking the knowledge that this evening would indeed be important, though not in the way Marcus expected. "What can I bring you to drink?" As she took their orders, Elena overheard fragments of their conversation about the meeting with Chen Wei. They were discussing projected profits, expansion timelines, and the prestige that would come with having an international partner. Marcus was particularly animated about the cultural authenticity that Chen's involvement would bring to his developments. "Having a Chinese partner opens doors. It gives us credibility in international markets, and frankly, the cultural angle will be great for marketing." Elena served their drinks and appetizers, listening to Marcus reduce Chen Wei and his culture to marketing opportunities, completely oblivious to the irony of his words. When Chen Wei himself entered the restaurant at exactly 7 p.m., Elena felt her heart rate increase with anticipation. Chen was impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit, his bearing radiating quiet authority. He spotted Marcus's table immediately, but made no move to join them. Instead, he approached the hostess station and requested a table in Elena's section. "Mr. Chen," Elena said as she approached his table, her voice carefully professional despite the electricity she felt in the air. "Good evening. Will you be dining alone tonight?" "Actually," Chen replied, his voice carrying clearly across the nearby tables, "I'm expecting some colleagues to join me shortly. In the meantime, I'd like to congratulate you on your new position. I'm very much looking forward to working with you." The words hung in the air like a revelation. At table 7, Marcus's conversation faltered as his brain processed what he had just heard. David Sterling's face went pale, and their two colleagues looked confused by the sudden change in atmosphere. "Thank you, Mr. Chen," Elena replied, her voice gaining strength and confidence. "I'm excited about the challenges ahead. The Latin American expansion project has tremendous potential." Marcus was staring at them now, his expression shifting from confusion to dawning comprehension to something approaching horror. The woman he had mocked, dismissed, and humiliated for months was casually discussing business projects with the man he desperately needed as a partner. "Elena," Chen continued, his voice projecting just enough to ensure Marcus could hear every word, "I've been reviewing your proposal for the Brazilian market entry strategy. Your insights into regional business cultures are exactly what our expansion needs." "I'm glad you found it useful," Elena replied, now fully embracing the moment. "I have some additional thoughts on the Mexican market that I'd like to discuss at Monday's strategy meeting." The transformation was complete. In the span of 30 seconds, Elena had shifted from servant to colleague, from the object of Marcus's contempt to the subject of his desperate envy. Marcus rose from his table, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded, his voice loud enough to draw stares from across the restaurant.
Chen Wei turned slowly to face Marcus, his expression calm and unreadable. "Good evening, Marcus. I believe we have a meeting scheduled." "Damn right we do," Marcus sputtered, "and I'd like to know what kind of game you're playing here." "Game?" Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Elena and I were simply discussing business matters. She is our new Director of Latin American Business Development." The title hit Marcus like a physical blow. The woman he had dismissed as intellectually inferior was now holding a position more senior than most of his own employees. "This is ridiculous," Marcus said, his voice rising dangerously. "You can't seriously expect me to believe that she," he gestured dismissively at Elena, "is qualified for that kind of position." The restaurant had grown quiet, with diners at nearby tables openly watching the confrontation unfold. Elena felt the familiar burn of humiliation begin to rise, but this time it was tempered by something new, the knowledge that she no longer had to accept Marcus's judgment of her worth. "Actually," Elena said, her voice clear and strong, "I think my qualifications speak for themselves. Master's degree in international relations, fluency in 5 languages, published research in cross-cultural business communications, and 8 years of experience navigating between different cultural communities." She paused, letting her credentials sink in before delivering the final blow. "But perhaps most importantly, I understand that success in international business requires respect for all people, regardless of their background or accent. It's a quality that seems to be increasingly rare among American business leaders." The silence that followed was profound. Marcus's face cycled through several shades of red as the implications of Elena's words settled over the room like a toxic cloud. "You set me up," Marcus said to Chen, his voice shaking with rage. "This whole thing was designed to humiliate me." Chen's expression remained perfectly composed. "Marcus, I did nothing except recognize talent and character when I encountered them. If you feel humiliated, perhaps you should examine your own behavior rather than blaming others for their success." David Sterling had been trying unsuccessfully to become invisible in his chair, but now he found his voice. "Marcus, please, let's just go to your office and discuss the partnership proposal privately." "There won no partnership," Chen said firmly, his accent momentarily thickening with emotion. "I cannot do business with someone who treats other human beings as objects of entertainment. A man who shows such disrespect for a restaurant server
will inevitably show the same disrespect for employees, partners, and customers. Marcus's world was crumbling around him, and he responded the way bullies often do when their power is threatened, with desperate, escalating aggression. "You think you're so superior," he snarled at Elena, "but you're still just a waitress with delusions of grandeur. You'll be back here in 6 months when reality sets in." Elena felt the familiar surge of anger, but this time it was accompanied by something new, absolute certainty in her own worth. She stood straighter, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had nothing left to prove. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, her accent adding dignity rather than vulnerability to her words, "I want to thank you." The unexpected response caught Marcus off guard. "What?" "I want to thank you for showing me exactly what I never want to become. Your cruelty taught me the value of kindness. Your prejudice showed me the importance of seeing people's potential rather than their limitations. And your behavior tonight has demonstrated to everyone in this room the difference between success and character." Elena moved closer to Marcus, her presence somehow commanding despite her server's uniform. "You see, Mr. Whitfield, the difference between us isn't accent or background or education. The difference is that I choose to lift people up while you seem to need to tear them down to feel important. That's not strength, it's weakness disguised as superiority." The restaurant was completely silent now, every conversation suspended as diners watched the confrontation unfold. Marcus stood frozen, unable to respond to Elena's calm destruction of his worldview. Chen Wei rose from his table, his movement breaking the spell that had fallen over the room. "Elena, I believe our colleagues have arrived. Shall we move to the private dining room for our strategy meeting?" Elena nodded, untying her apron for the last time and laying it gently on Chen's table. The gesture was symbolic, a shedding of one identity and the full embrace of another. As they walked toward the private dining room, Elena heard Marcus's voice behind them, desperate and pleading. "Chen, wait! We can work something out. The partnership proposal has been permanently declined," Chen replied, without turning around. "I suggest you use this experience to examine your character, Marcus. Success without decency is just elaborate failure." In the private dining room, Elena found herself seated at a conference table with 3 of Chen Wei's senior executives, all of whom treated her with the respect and professional courtesy that her new position deserved. As they discussed expansion strategies and market analysis, Elena realized that this was more than just a job. It was a vindication of every sacrifice she had made, every insult she had endured, and every dream she had refused to abandon. Through the glass doors of the private dining room, she could see Marcus still standing in the main restaurant, his colleagues having abandoned him to his humiliation. He looked lost, as if the fundamental assumptions that had guided his life had suddenly been revealed as illusions. David Sterling approached Marcus cautiously, his expression a mixture of sympathy and disgust. "Marcus, we need to leave. People are staring." "This isn't over," Marcus said, though his voice lacked conviction. "I'll find another partner. There are other opportunities." But even as he spoke the words, Marcus seemed to understand that this moment had changed everything. His reputation in the city's business community would never recover from the public display of his character. The story of his humiliation at the hands of a restaurant server would spread through the elite social circles he had worked so hard to penetrate. As Marcus and his remaining colleagues left the Grandview in defeat, Elena was finalizing plans for her first business trip to Mexico City. The transformation was complete, but more than that, it was deserved. Every late night spent studying, every cruel comment endured with dignity, every dream deferred but not abandoned had led to this moment. "Elena," Chen said as the meeting concluded, "I have one more surprise for you." He handed her a key attached to a corporate keychain. "Your company car is parked in the executive garage. I thought you might prefer not to take the bus to work on Monday." Elena stared at the key, remembering the countless hours she had spent waiting for buses, carrying heavy textbooks, and dreaming of a day when she would have the means to control her own transportation. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I don't know how to thank you." "Succeed," Chen replied simply. "Be everything I know you can be, and help me build bridges between cultures instead of walls. That's all the thanks I need." As Elena left the Grandview for the final time, she passed the table where Marcus had sat just an hour earlier. The water glasses still bore the fingerprints of his defeat, and the chair where he had held court in his imagined superiority now seemed like a throne built on quicksand. The city lights that had seemed so distant now felt like welcoming beacons, illuminating a path toward a future that Elena had built through determination, intelligence, and an unwavering belief in her own worth. The American dream that had seemed so elusive when she arrived 8 years ago was finally, tangibly, within her grasp. 6 months later, Elena stood in her corner office, overlooking the city, reviewing contracts for Chen International's newest manufacturing partnership in Sao Paulo. Sofia, now enrolled in an elite private school, had just called to share news of her acceptance into the gifted program. Marcus Whitfield's real estate empire had crumbled after word spread through the business community about his behavior at the Grandview. His investors fled, his projects stalled, and his reputation lay in ruins. Elena kept a photo on her desk from that final night at the restaurant, not of her humiliation, but of her transformation. It reminded her daily that character, dignity, and perseverance could overcome any prejudice. She had built bridges between cultures, just as Chen had envisioned, proving that the American dream belonged to anyone brave enough to pursue it with integrity.